Hi guys, it's Kathy. I hope you're doing well. Sorry about 2 days ago. I was not feeling well. But we're picking it up today and there's an issue. So, I'm pretty sure we finished. This tells me what we've seen so far, okay? I know that we saw these. This one is halfway through, which is really confusing. And this one looks like it started, which is really, really, really confusing. I think we're I think we might be here, actually. So I'm going to start it here. And if we've already seen it, then I'll fix it. But I think that we are here. We'll see. We'll just fix it. If it's wrong, we'll fix it.
Both the victims.
And other than that, did you ever see them? You did not see them in the walkway leading back to the rear alley. Did you see them in the rear driveway?
No, the closest I saw them to that would be inside the residence.
Did you ever see either one of them go in or out of the garage door?
No.
I don't fully remember, but I think we watched him leave the stand, didn't we? He was done with his. Oh, no, 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 no. We were ready. This is where we were. Because he was ready. Conqueror was ready to get up and question him. This is it.
May I have a moment? Oh, lastly, sir, were you present when the photographs containing the numbered tags were being taken by the photographer?
I was in the area.
And the numbered tags that we saw in some of these photographs, do you know who placed those items?
Placed the tag?
Placed the tags, yeah.
Yes, that would be the criminalist, Mr. Fung.
And the tags that he was placing on evidence, was that evidence that you directed him to specifically direct his attention to?
Yes.
You indicated that he arrived before the coroner left
Yes,
and before the bodies were removed.
that's correct.
What did he do before the bodies were actually removed from the location, if anything?
Nothing.
Had he just arrived at that point?
Yes.
And was he wearing gloves, sir?
I don't recall.
Was he wearing booties?
I don't believe so, but I don't recall.
You don't remember?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Mr. Cochran.
I don't think I can finish it today.
Well, do your best.
Do my best.
Now, what's your preference, counsel? I mean, we have about 12 minutes remaining in the court day.
About
There
12
are
minutes?
some, Mr. Schecker, there's still some DNA matters we need to resolve. Your choice, Mr. Cochran.
Judge Sloan. Please not to go today, Your Honor, so
I'm just telling Mr. Cochran I don't want to hear his mouth this afternoon, and so,
because of that, I'd like to ask a few questions if I might, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good afternoon.
I sort of don't want to hear his mouth this afternoon, too.
You have been a homicide detective for more than 20 years, is that correct?
It's approximately 20 years.
And as a homicide detective, you've had some great experience in investigating homicides as such, is that correct?
Yes.
And in the course of your career as a Los Angeles police officer detective, you have investigated, I believe you said, some 250 to 300 homicides, right?
Either directly or indirectly, yes.
And you know that when you come on the scene of a homicide, as a detective, one of the things that you want to know is you want to try to solve the particular crime or crimes, isn't that correct?
Certainly.
And you know that you're not an island unto yourself. You have a team of people who work with you, isn't that correct?
In most cases, some cases, it hasn't been that way.
In this case, you had a team of people that would ultimately be at your disposal, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And in that team, you would have your partner, Detective Van Adder, is that correct?
Correct.
You utilized the services of Detectives Furman and Phillips while they were still there, is that correct?
Correct.
You told us about the use of criminalists, is that correct?
Yes.
And the criminalist you talked about was a criminalist by the name of Dennis Fung, is that correct?
Yes.
There was also another, a female criminalist who came out there by the name of Mazzola, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Mazzola?
I believe there's two L's, but yes.
And Mazzola, in fact, was the officer in charge as between she and Fung on that particular day, is that correct?
That's not my understanding.
Did you see any reports which indicated that she was, in fact, the officer in charge?
I have heard of a report that probably incorrectly states that she was. It's my understanding she was a trainee.
In fact, she was a trainee, wasn't she?
I believe so, yes.
And this was only her third crime scene, isn't that correct?
I don't know.
You don't know that? All right. So you had these criminalists, then you had some print people, fingerprint people, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you had them do fingerprints throughout, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Did you have anybody come out and check for footprints? Do you have any footprint specialists there?
No, other than the criminalist who I requested to do a stride analysis and photograph the prints. Other than that, no.
Did you ever ask anyone to go over into this loose dirt area that you've described for us and attempt to see whether or not you could match up any shoe prints or footprints in that loose dirt area?
I myself checked that area and couldn't observe any.
But you couldn't observe any?
No.
Did you have anybody else come out and try to do that?
I did not recall specifically telling Fung to do that. He may have, I don't know.
You don't know if he did it or not?
No.
You knew, of course, that Mr. Goldman had been in that area, is that correct?
Yes.
You knew, of course, that his assailant or assailants had perhaps been in that area, isn't that correct?
I believe that to be the case.
You knew because you saw a picture of Detective Furman that he had been in that area. His footprints were in there, is that right?
Yes.
Objection. Counsel testifying to be no facts. Assumes facts, not.
Well, that's
Well, the
a speaking objection, Your Honor. That's a speaking objection, Your Honor.
At this point, the objection...
Hold on. Objection. Counsel is testifying, assumes facts not in evidence, is absolutely not a speaking objection. That is a lawful objection.
is sustained, but it's just a foundational question.
Sure. You've seen that photograph of Detective Furman pointing down toward the foliage with his foot in that loose dirt, didn't you?
Yes.
So you know he was in there also, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And we know at some point, did Miss Radcliffe go over in that area?
Yes, she did.
Did she go over there with her assistant to move Mr. Goldman's body at some point?
Yes.
So there have been a number of people who have been walking in this loose dirt area, isn't that correct?
Over a period of time, yes.
Yes. Prior to the bodies being moved, right?
Yes.
Now, sir, as an experienced homicide detective, one of the things that you would want to know and try to determine would be the time of death of these victims. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And so that we're clear, and the jury's clear, the L.A. County Coroner's Office is a separate county entity, separate and distinct from the Los Angeles Police Department. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And the Coroner's Office, they have their own training. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
They have investigators and they have doctors, don't they?
Yes.
And you rely upon them in the course of your homicide investigations. Isn't that correct?
Certainly.
And over the course of your 20 years, whenever you've had a body in Los Angeles City, you've had to call the coroner and you've had to work hand in glove with the coroner. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
It's probably a good play on words, hand in glove, right?
Yes.
And you've worked together and you rely upon each other. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, in that connection, you know that the coroner's office, when they get to the scene, they do things like take a liver temperature. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And what other things that are you aware of that the coroner's office will do in an effort to determine or extrapolate backwards and determine the cause of death, the time of death?
In an effort to generally determine time of death, I'm aware of several things they would do. They would test for rigor mortis. They would test perhaps for lividity, of course the liver temperature. They would interview the investigator at the scene.
Anything else you can think of now? They oftentimes check the eye fluids.
I'm aware of that examination, but I'm also aware that the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office does not conduct those examinations in the field.
But you are aware of the eye fluids.
Yes.
Check. All right, now you mentioned rigor mortis. And in the time the coroner is there and these bodies were moved, what time was that? Where was the body of Nicole Brown Simpson moved?
Approximately 10:30, 10:40 right in that time.
A.M.
A.M.
on June 13th, right?
Yes,
And at that time, was she in full rigor mortis?
she was.
And by that, what do you mean by full rigor mortis?
By full rigor mortis, it means that the muscles in the body have become rigid due to a coagulation of protein in the blood.
All right. And with regard to lividity, what can you tell us about lividity with regard to her body, if anything, at that time?
Her body had no lividity.
All right. And what was the ambient temperature at or about the time of 10:30 a.m.? What was the temperature outside there at the time the coroners arrived?
I believe it was 70 degrees.
And you said that the coroners took her body into the coroner's vehicle and took a liver temperature, right?
Yes,
And what was the liver temperature obtained at that time?
I believe the liver temperature was 82 degrees.
Now, these things that the coroner's office did at 10:30 a.m., approximately 10 and a half hours after the first officer arrived at the scene, in your experience, it would have been better had they been able to do those things much earlier and after these bodies were found. Isn't that correct?
Not necessarily.
Well, in a perfect homicide investigation, which I'm sure you strive for, wouldn't you want to have the coroner out there as soon as possible to render that kind of assistance, to check the liver temperature, to check the lividity, to check the state of rigor mortis as early as possible? Wouldn't you want that?
Yes,
All right, that would be ideal, would it not? If you could do that.
that would be ideal. We
All right.
don't often see that.
All right. Now, with regard to, and I'll be mindful of the hour, Your Honor. With regard to this area, this loose dirt area you've been talking about, and maybe you can see that photograph, Jonathan. What's that?
Exhibit 83, Your
We
Honor.
weren't feeling it.
I'm sorry, that's an incorrect laser code.
Now, with regard to People's Exhibit 83, a couple of questions. This area, so that we're clear, how wide is this particular area? Did you take some measurements?
Sustain. Why don't you rephrase the question?
Certainly. What is the width of this area where Mr. Goldman's body was located, sir? The width?
From south to north, in the direction that we're looking, it's 5 feet 8 inches.
All right, so it's less than 6 feet from south to north. And from the tree, looking west to east, how wide is it?
I have that on the schematic. I believe it's something like 4 feet 2 inches. That's
So,
right.
something like 5 foot 8 inches by 4 foot 2 inches, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you ascertained, did you not, that Mr. Goldman was at least 5 foot 10 inches tall?
Yes.
And he weighed how much?
I believe it's approximately 170, 175 pounds.
And that loose dirt area over there indicates to you there had been some movement, some violent movement of the earth to cause that, as far as you could tell. Isn't that correct?
I don't know. That's something I surmised.
Well, I know you weren't at the scene, right? But
Right.
you have surmised a number of things. And one of the things you surmised was that that dirt was moved in the course of the altercation. Isn't that correct?
I have no way of knowing that, but it did appear to be freshly moved, yes.
Freshly moved dirt, isn't that right?
It appeared to be that way.
All right. And you also described, when Ms. Clark was asking you questions, that Mr. Goldman may have had some keys in his hands at the time that he was being confronted by assailants or assailants. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you know, do you not, that if a person has keys in their hands, that is one of the ways that you could inflict a wound on the person who is attacking you. Isn't that correct?
I suppose that's possible.
In addition to that, at some point, Mr. Goldman also apparently had a ring on his finger. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And so this area that we now know is less than 6 feet and about 4 feet also had a tree as depicted there in People's 83, kind of right in the middle of it. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you have described for us earlier that Mr. Goldman, in the course of this altercation, sustained some defensive wounds. Is that correct? In his hands?
Appeared to be that way, yes.
Had some cuts on his hands?
Yes.
And you know, and it's your opinion, that he put up a vigorous fight. Isn't that correct?
It was apparent he did put up a fight, yes.
All right? In this very small area. Isn't that correct?
I believe so, yes.
It's 4:30. We'll resume tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the afternoon. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you regarding the case. Do not conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. All right, have a pleasant evening. Detective Lang, you may step down. You're ordered to return tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Quiet, please.
All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Bailey. People represented by Ms. Clark, Mr. Darden, and Ms. Lewis. Good morning, counsel. All right, anything we need to take up before we invite the jurors to rejoin us? Mr. Cochran, Ms. Lewis. Morning, counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor. Just briefly, Your Honor, yesterday I filed on behalf of the people, a motion to compel discovery of experts' reports and notes and so forth, which this court's minute order, or I should say written ruling of January 29th, had ordered the defense to disclose immediately. I understand that that was short notice. However, because these are materials which were previously ordered by this court to be disclosed, I don't think the normal 10-day period is appropriate. So what is the court's pleasure in terms of when we should calendar this?
All right, Mr. Douglas, when do you think you'll be available to, or able to address this matter?
The motion was faxed to Dean Ullman yesterday. He asked that he be given until Tuesday to respond. I'd asked to have the matter heard on Wednesday, which is less than 10 days' notice. I do not think that the materials under this motion are part of the court's earlier discovery order. I think, as the court will recall, we mentioned this particular problem and the need to resolve it, and so now is a good time as any, I think.
All right, Ms. Lewis, are you going to be available Wednesday?
Certainly, Your Honor.
All right, Wednesday, 9 a.m. Thank you, counsel.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Clark, anything else before we invite the jurors to join us?
I'm sorry. Just before any videotapes are shown to Detective Lang, we want an opportunity to be heard outside the presence of the jury. So when we get to that point, I appreciate if counsel would let us know.
All right.
If you want to, this one part, I don't have all of it yet, and I will do that regarding anything else that we receive. But Mr. Harris can show the court this one part. It's very, very quick.
All right, do you anticipate using that this morning?
No, Your Honor, there's so much. I doubt it, but I'd like you to look at it. It's going to take 2 minutes. Can Detective Lang step out here?
Sure.
I doubt it, Mr. Lang, but I'd like you to look at it.
All right. All right, Mr. Harris, good morning. Do you want to run this for us, please? Are there any victims? All right.
He looks like he's drugged.
All right. Ms. Clark, do you have any objection?
They'll find a way to blame the barking dog if he falls asleep.
That's it for now, Ms. Clark. And if there's others that come, I'll let you know before I wrap up.
Any objection?
No.
All right. Thank you. All right. Anything else? All right. I'd like to speak to counsel at the sidebar without the report, please. Clark.
He's on the phone. Oh my. Oh, what is the bell saying? What's going on? No, I'm not fast forwarding this. I don't know what's going on. He's looking at the gallery. Maybe there's someone in the gallery feeding news to the press from their cellular phone. Hi, Kelly. Yes, I see the hourglasses. I read uh, I don't know, a couple days ago in the stream that people were sending him hourglasses through this trial, so he had extra. What are they doing? With their badges, they're members of the press, right? I'm sure. I don't know who she is. She doesn't have a badge. Oh, that was nothing. I was expecting something, and then they go to this stupid wall. Uh oh.
We had
Oh, there we go.
addressed some issues at the scene at Bundy, and you had shared with us, I believe, that it was your opinion that Mr. Cole Brown Simpson's body was in full rigor mortis. Is that correct?
Yes.
And of course, you never touched the body, did you?
No, I did not.
And how did you make that determination of your own independent knowledge that she was in full rigor without touching the body?
By observing the coroner investigator examine the body.
And so you stood there and watched them, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, in that connection, you've shared with us that part of your regulations and part of the LAPD manual would prohibit an officer from touching the body prior to the arrival of the coroner. Is that correct?
Under most circumstances, there are times when the investigator may request that the detective assist perhaps in moving a body.
All right, and you, of course, never touched the body, right? Before the coroner arrived.
Before the coroner arrives, no, I don't believe I did.
And in this particular case, I'm talking about this case.
Yes.
And as far as you know, Detectives Van Adder, Phillips, nor Furman touched the body. All right, is that correct?
I never saw them touch the body.
All right. Are you aware that Officer Risky, the first patrolman on the scene, touched Mr. Goldman's body? Are you aware of that?
Only through the testimony of Officer Risky.
And where'd you see that testimony, hear that testimony?
I heard that testimony.
Where'd you hear it?
Where?
Were you here?
I was observing it on television.
So you're watching television?
Yes.
And you remember he said he went around and touched Mr. Goldman's face, I guess, in the area of the eye.
Was he allowed to do that? Watch it on television?
Thought it was the eyeball, maybe
The eyeball.
mistaken. Yes.
All right. And other than that, do you know of anyone who touched these particular bodies?
Prior to the arrival of the coroner, I don't believe I saw anyone do that.
Now, yesterday, you shared with us your belief that there was no lividity in the body of Nicole Brown Simpson while at the scene, and you recall that testimony?
I believe I testified I didn't observe any. There didn't appear to be any lividity.
All right, can you tell the court and jury what is lividity?
Lividity is a sinking of the blood in the body after death to the lowest point of the body, and this is caused by a gravitational pull. Post-mortem lividity will usually become fixed in 3 to 4 hours after death and remain fixed.
And is it your recollection that you saw no lividity in the body of Nicole Brown Simpson?
That's my recollection, yes.
You don't recall that when she was laying on her side that there was a purplish color in her face, that you noticed certain portions of her body that were different colors?
I didn't make any close observation on lividity.
Did you at any time see her body when the black dress she was wearing was in any way pulled up, so it would reveal her body?
I may have.
And do you recall seeing any lividity or any discoloration of the skin at that point?
I don't recall seeing anything that I would call marked lividity.
All right, well, when you say marked lividity, did you see any lividity at all, sir? As you think about it now, and you can feel free to look at your notes if you have notes in that regard.
I don't recall seeing any lividity. That's not to say that it wasn't there. That's to say that that wasn't something that I particularly looked for.
Now, yesterday you shared with us that you had, that you believe that the coroner's office had taken a liver temperature of Miss Nicole Brown Simpson. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you recorded a number of 82 for us, and you recorded that as about 10:30 to 10:40 a.m. on June 13th. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Now, in order to take a liver temperature, did you see the coroner actually use a scalpel to actually take the liver temperature in this case? Did you see that?
That's the method that's normally employed by them, yes.
All right, and so that we're clear about that, the method is that the liver is somewhere under the diaphragm, under the rib cage. Isn't that correct?
A little lower than that, but yes.
And in order to take this liver temperature, they have to make an incision, put a hole in there, and they take the temperature that way. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, were you present when this happened? For either one of the bodies?
I was present for Mr. Goldman. As far as Mrs. Simpson, I believe that was done in the van. So
All right.
I didn't actually observe that.
All right, so with regard to Mrs. Simpson, and you were told by somebody this was done, or you were just told the results?
No, it's my recollection. I believe I requested of the investigator to do a liver temp. I don't believe it was done
Through the toe?
immediately
Maybe.
when the body was removed.
And so that we're clear, why did you want to have a liver temperature done, sir?
It could be an indicator to assist one in establishing an approximate time of death.
In fact, in your 20 years of experience, you've almost always tried to get a liver temperature where possible, where you're on the scene within a reasonable time after what you believe is the time of death. Isn't that correct?
It would depend on the appearance of the body. As an example, one wouldn't want to necessarily do that if you had a decomposed body or a bloated body.
I wonder if the liver was full of alcohol, if that would change the temperature at all.
I understand. that.
Under most circumstances, if you can get a liver temperature, then that's what you want to do.
All right, so that's a normal thing under most circumstances. And in this instance, with regard to Miss Nicole Brown Simpson, you were not present, and do you know how the liver temperature was actually taken? Do you know that for a fact?
Again, I don't recall observing it myself.
All right. Now, a couple of days later, on the 14th or thereabouts, or a day or so later, you attended an autopsy in this matter, did you not?
Yes.
And so you were present when these bodies were autopsied, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And at that time, did you see any kind of a round hole in the body at about the place where the liver would be? You remember? On Miss Nicole Brown Simpson?
I wouldn't have looked for one, so I don't recall seeing one.
So you don't recall one way or the other, right?
That's correct.
So at any rate, without seeing this, you were advised that the liver temperature was 82 by the coroner's investigator, Mr. Ratcliffe. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, with
All right, if I pass away, guys, remember, you cannot gauge by my liver when I died.
regard to Mr. Goldman, you described for us that after, let me see if I understand the sequence of events. Some sheets were placed down under these bodies. Is that correct?
No. There was a plastic sheet placed out on the walkway,
All right.
and the bodies were moved onto the plastic sheet where they were examined for such things as a rigor mortis and liver temperature and these types of things.
All right. And after the examination was concluded with regard to Miss Nicole Brown Simpson, was the sheet left there and the body was taken away?
No, the plastic sheet that she was on remained with her. She was
All right.
wrapped in that sheet.
Was there some other kind of sheet left there under the plastic sheet after the body was taken away?
There was a light cotton blanket that was there, yes.
All right. And that light cotton blanket had been put down at what time, if you recall?
I don't recall. It would have to have been sometime around 7:30 a.m. perhaps.
All right. After you'd come back from the Rockingham residence, right?
Yes.
Now, and then after Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's body had been moved, then Mr. Goldman's body was lifted and put somewhere in that area, somewhere near where her body had been. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
And was a plastic sheet put around his body also?
The plastic sheet was laid down first on the walkway, and he was placed on top of the sheet.
Did you at all assist the coroner's representatives in moving that body out of this very small area we described yesterday over onto the sheet, Mr. Goldman's body?
I don't recall if I assisted them or not. I don't believe so because of the confined space.
The small space.
I may have assisted in some slight way, but I don't recall.
All right, now, with regard to Mr. Goldman, now, were you present when the liver temperature was taken?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you see the coroner do in taking his liver temperature?
My recollection is it was taken in the conventional way.
And by that, what do you mean by conventional way?
There was a cut made around the area, and the thermometer was inserted, to the best of my recollection.
And as you sit here now, can you visualize that? That actually happened? Think back.
I recall seeing I was doing several things while this was going on. I was aware that it was going on. My only vivid recollection is of the thermometer in the body.
All right, do you recall seeing the thermometer stuck in the body?
I recall seeing it in there, yes.
Okay, and what was the liver temperature of Mr. Goldman that you received?
I believe that was
your notes?
also, I'm
If you
sorry?
need your notes at any point, let us know.
Okay. I believe that was also 82 degrees.
82 degrees?
Yes.
And the ambient temperature was about the same as you told us yesterday?
Yes, 70 degrees.
So it was 70 degrees to June 13th, is that correct?
Yes.
By the way, did you ever have occasion in the course of your investigation to determine the ambient temperature at about between 11 and 12 o'clock p.m. on June 12th?
I may well have. I requested various records from I believe, the National Weather Bureau, and without checking those, I couldn't tell you just how far they went back.
Well, do you have some notes that will refresh your recollection in that regard?
I have the Weather Service report.
All right, can you get that for us, or can we get that for you?
Fine.
All right, well, where do we look?
Well, it might take a moment here.
All right, well, if the court will allow, I would ask.
Certainly.
Thank you.
I have in front of me the U.S. Department of Commerce report. Consisting of several pages, dated August 10th, 1994. I also have a National Weather Service report dated June 12th, 1994. There are quite a few figures on here. It may take a moment to, is that 11 p.m.?
Yeah, between 11 and 12 midnight on June 12th.
We can just Google it real quick, but no.
You need a straight edge, Detective Lang?
Well, I think I have it here, Your Honor. It appears that at 23:51, which would be 11:51 p.m., temperature was 64
Sean.
degrees.
You're older than Google.
Can you compare that with this other gauge you have from the U.S. Department of Commerce, sir? 11, 20.
Detective Lang, you're losing your microphone there. There you go.
Y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here.
Station on the other report states that at 11:46 p.m. it was 66 degrees.
And the first one that you read, is that for Los Angeles or Santa Monica?
I believe it's LAX. but
Pittsburgh.
I'd have to double check here.
All right. So I think that, so can we, and you were around that morning, having gotten up and come from your home, so would you believe that the temperature was probably somewhere between 64 to 66, somewhere between, say, 11 and midnight on June 12th? That'd be a fair statement.
I'd say that was fair, yes.
All right. Now, so with regard to Mr. Goldman's body, you were then given this 82 liver temperature, and you knew the ambient temperature was 70, and then his body was then moved from the location. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so that we're clear, these bodies were moved from the Bundy location by the coroner's representatives about what time on June 13th, 1994?
Approximately 10:30 or 10:40 a.m.,
All right. Now,
perhaps a little before that.
now, with regard to Mr. Goldman's shoes, can you describe for the jury the kind of shoes he was wearing?
I would call them cloth-type athletic boots. They were, the bodies were rubber, appeared to be rubber. They appeared to be some type of athletic boots. And if I recall correctly, there was a cloth upper part that went all the way to mid-calf, perhaps.
And they had some kind of a patterned sole, is that correct?
I believe so.
Now, in the course of your investigation, you had occasion, did you not, to try and determine whether or not you saw the pattern that was displayed on Mr. Goldman's shoes, whether or not you saw that pattern in any of that blood, whether he had any bloody footprints from his shoes. You checked that, didn't you?
I may have.
All right, and you didn't find any pattern that matched Mr. Goldman's shoes in any of that blood there that day, did you?
If I had, I would have noted it.
And you didn't find, did you?
No.
So as far as the facts that evening. We know you weren't there, so we have to theorize about certain things. Is that a fair statement? Well, that's preliminary, Your Honor. Thank
You
you.
can answer the question.
I generally would not theorize. I would go with the evidence.
All right, but I'm saying with regard to who was killed first, you were not there, were you?
That's correct.
All right. So, if you speculate as to something, that's a theory, isn't it?
As far as who was killed first,
Yes.
it would be speculation because I might have 2 or 3 versions of what could have happened due to the evidence.
Right. In the final analysis, there's only one body that'll make that determination. In this case, isn't that right? And that's the 12 people over there. Isn't that correct?
Same. That's argumented.
Argument?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, so that we're clear, the patterns on Mr. Goldman's shoes, you did not find those patterns in any of that blood, which was very plentiful there at the scene at Bundy. Isn't that correct?
There was plenty of blood, yes.
Right. And you did not find the pattern of those shoes, right?
That's correct.
And if I were to show you, so that we're clear, I'd like to mark an exhibit, Counsel.
2-8.
I'd like, Your Honor, to, what is our next one?
1028.
1028. I've shown this to counsel. May I approach the witness?
You may.
I have what purports to be a white pattern athletic shoe. And I'd like to place this before Detective Lang and ask him, does that appear to you to be a fair portrayal of the bottom of Mr. Goldman's shoe? Does it appear that when at the coroner's office there where the picture was allegedly taken?
I don't believe this was taken at the coroner's office, sir.
Well, wherever it was taken.
This appears to be taken at the crime scene.
Okay.
Yes, that appears to be Mr. Goldman's right foot, the bottom of the shoe.
All right. And do you want to check any notes to make sure that you did not see or find that pattern anywhere? Are you pretty sure about that?
I don't recall seeing that pattern.
All right.
I have several pages of notes. I could review them, I suppose, but I don't recall seeing that pattern.
And if during the break, if you change your mind on that or change your testimony, you can let us know.
I certainly will.
All right. Now, with regard to and this picture here, 1028, was, as best you can tell, taken at the scene. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there's a person dressed in blue who has a glove on. Do you recall seeing one of the coroner's representatives with a glove on that
Yes.
morning?
Yes.
Were you able to determine whether or not the coroners in moving the body got or touched Mr. Goldman's shoes with the blood that was there? Do you recall that?
I'm not sure I'm clear on your question.
As they, at any point when you were at the scene, when the coroner's representatives moved Mr. Goldman's body from one location to the other, did you see them have his shoes come in contact with any of that blood that was there on the sidewalk and around?
I don't recall ever seeing the shoes come in contact with any blood.
You did at some point see stains on the shoes, did you not? Blood stains?
Yes.
Both on the top of the shoes and kind of under into the side of the shoes, isn't that correct?
I believe so.
Just a second, Your Honor.
No, you had years to prepare. Let's go. Come on. What is that book OJ is looking at? It has a whole bunch of pictures in it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sorry. While at the scene, dear, did you ever instruct the coroner's representatives to bag the hands of both Mr. Simpson and Mrs. Simpson and Mr. Goldman?
No.
And what is the procedure of bagging hands regarding decedents?
If there appears to be perhaps evidence on the hands, or if there was perhaps a firearm involved, the coroner's investigator may in fact want to bag the hands.
All right.
I don't recall seeing that in this case.
You don't recall that seeing it?
No.
And if there were evidence, let's say under Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's fingernails, bagging the hands would help preserve any trace evidence that might be under her fingernails or on her hands. Isn't that a fair statement?
Overruled.
Yes.
You can answer.
Isn't that correct?
Again, that would be speculative on my part.
Well, let's see now. You're a homicide detective of over 20 years' experience, right? Well, that's foundational.
Sustain.
And,
The way it's phrased,
all right,
it's
well,
argumentative.
let me see. You're a homicide detective of 20 years' experience, aren't you?
Yes.
And in that connection, you have seen hands bagged before, isn't that correct?
Yes, I have.
And if you knew there were trace evidence under the fingernails of Miss Nicole Brown Simpson, wouldn't you want to try and preserve that?
I believe that was preserved without the bags is what I'm getting at.
The question is, wouldn't you want to try and preserve that?
Overruled.
Certainly.
And wouldn't the best way to preserve that so it wouldn't become degraded or contaminated in any way would be to put bags over the hands so they would be protected for later analysis? Isn't that correct?
Well, that's one way. There are other ways.
All right, what are the other ways?
To wrap the body in plastic and preserve the whole body?
All right, did the coroner's office do that in this case?
Yes.
They wrapped the body in plastic, both bodies?
The bodies were wrapped in a plastic sheet initially, yes.
But when you wrap the body in plastic sheets, don't you then wrap all of the clothes and any trace evidence on the clothes is all wrapped up and brought together? Isn't that another downside of that?
No, that's exactly the purpose in doing that, to keep everything together.
I see. So in this case, you're saying to us that a viable alternative to bagging the hands is to wrap these bodies in plastic?
I'm not
Overruled.
I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying that there are other ways of doing things.
All right. But certainly bagging the hands would be...
Carmen, you need to let him finish his answer.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Excuse me, Your Honor. Did
I
you
was
finish?
just going to add that this is common, very common in gunshot cases where perhaps you want to preserve the hands to take gunshot residue examinations on the hands.
All right. Well, in this case, we didn't have gunshots. So what I'd like to ask you is that one of the ways of preserving trace evidence under fingernails and on the hands would have been to bag the hands. Is that right?
I suppose one could say that.
And that was not done, was it?
I don't believe it was.
For either Ms. Simpson or Mr. Goldman, is that correct?
Yes.
Now, yesterday you had told us, in your discussion of rigor mortis, you gave us, I believe, a description of what you believed rigor mortis to be. And I believe you told us that you believed it was coagulation of proteins in the blood. Remember saying that yesterday?
I believe it's a stiffening of the muscles in the body after death caused by a coagulation of the blood in the muscles.
All right. Is it not true that the rigor mortis is caused by the coagulation of proteins in muscle and not proteins in the blood? It's the coagulation of proteins in the muscle. Is that
Blood,
correct?
Oops, that might have been me. Sorry.
blood and blood that would be in the muscle tissue.
In the
certainly,
muscle
yes.
tissue,
Yes.
right? All right. Did you notice any kind of purplish color to Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's face as she laid at the scene there?
I don't recall any purplish color.
You don't recall that?
No.
and clicking his pen, click, 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 and stamping.
Now, with regard to Mr. Goldman, because of the struggle he was involved in, wasn't there an indication to you as a seasoned homicide investigator that you'd want to preserve any possible trace evidence under his fingernails also?
Did we hear the smoke detector go off yet today? I don't know now.
That would be a consideration, yes,
And did you think about that morning, that morning?
certainly.
And did you then instruct the coroner to bag the hands?
No.
Now, with regard to the coroner, we know that the coroner, his representatives got there at 9:10 and about 9:20. Is that correct?
Approximately, yes.
At what point did you instruct or did you call for the criminalist to come to the scene?
I did not specifically request the criminalist to the scene. The criminalist had been originally dispatched to the Rockingham location, and it was my understanding that when the criminalist was through at Rockingham, they would proceed to Bundy.
Let me see if I understand this. The criminalist in this case went to Rockingham first before they came to the Bundy crime scene?
That's correct.
Who called them to come to the Rockingham crime scene, Rockingham scene?
I believe that was done by my partner,
And what was your partner's name?
Van Etter.
All right, now, so there's no confusion. As between you and Van Adder, with regard to time and grade as a homicide detective, is he senior to you?
Not as a homicide detective. Time and grade and rank, he's perhaps 3 months senior to me in rank.
All right, so he outranked you at the scene there?
Honestly, does not matter.
That's not really the way it works.
Well, I'm just asking you from a standpoint of time and grade in this position, first of all.
As far as our rank structure, yes, by 3 months.
All right, by 3 months.
He was promoted 3 months before I was.
Okay. Now, so the jury's clear, though. As between you and Van Adder, who was in charge of this investigation on the early morning hours of June 12th, June 13th, June 13th, actually?
It's a responsibility that would be shared by both partners.
So you were co-leaders?
Dumbass.
That's correct.
You both had equal responsibility?
Initially, at a crime scene, that's the way it starts out. It depends. All crime scenes are different.
All right, so let's talk about this particular crime scene.
Stupid questions.
In this case, started
Stupid.
out, he arrived first, is that correct?
Yes,
He was senior in grade, right?
yes.
And that will never change. Those things will never change, will they?
No.
All right, and with regard to how the investigation of this case has continued, have you continued as co-lead investigators in this case
Yes.
to this day?
Well, the roles have somewhat changed around a bit, but basically that's what we do. We work as partners.
All right. And you have worked as partners for how long?
With Van Etter?
Yes, with Van Etter.
His wife is in the gallery saying he doesn't know what partner means. He doesn't know.
I want to say as a regular partner, approximately 4 to 5 years.
All right. Now, what time did the criminalists arrive at the Rockingham scene, if you know, that morning, June 13th?
I believe it was approximately 10 a.m.
And that's at Rockingham?
I'm sorry. I wasn't at Rockingham when the criminalists arrived.
Okay, so you know what time they got there. Would the log, would a review of the log assist you in that regard, refresh your recollection?
Certainly.
I'm placing before the witness, Your Honor, Defendant's Exhibit number 10006, and I'll ask him to read it to himself and see whether or not a review of that document will refresh his recollection regarding what time the
Refresh
criminalists
his
arrived at
recollection
Rockingham.
to an event that he wasn't there for. Okay, got it.
I believe this is the Bundy log you have here.
Excuse me, I'm just going to refresh my recollection of, the JK assassination real quick.
Mr. Bundy log?
Yes.
There's a Rockingham log?
I'm not aware of one.
All right, so you've never seen a Rockingham log?
I'm not aware of one.
Do you have any notes that will refresh your recollection with regard to what time they arrived there?
I
Fine,
wasn't there.
Ginny. I have
So I
to.
wasn't-
Well,
That's what
trace
she
it
said.
back. You arrived at Rockingham at about 5 a.m. in the morning?
I believe it was approximately 5:05 a.m.
All right, and you left about 6:35, 6:45 in the morning?
About 6:45, yes.
And when you left at 6:45, they had not arrived?
The criminalists
Criminals.
did not arrive, correct?
Had they been summoned at that point?
I believe it was about the time I left that I was told a criminalist was going to come by the location to do a presumptive test on the vehicle and then proceed to Bundy right after that.
All right, and who told you that?
I believe it was Van Etter.
All right, and Van Atta remained at the Rockingham location, is that correct?
Yes,
When you went back over to Bundy?
correct.
All right, so it was sometime after 6:45 in the morning that they arrived, is that correct? At Rockingham?
That would be my assumption,
All
yes.
right. And since you weren't there, you don't know the exact time. But we know that they arrived at the Bundy crime scene at what time?
I believe that was approximately 10:10 a.m.
And the bodies were still there at that point, is that correct?
Yes,
And when the criminalists arrived, let's give these criminalists some names. You saw Mazzola, did you not?
yes,
And you saw Fung. You saw two of them, is that correct?
yes.
And when they arrived at the Bundy crime scene, did you give them some instructions?
Not immediately, but shortly thereafter, yes.
And as you had done with Ratcliffe, the coroner's investigator, you took Ratcliffe around the scene and advised her of what you had there and what you'd found. Isn't that correct?
At the locations of the bodies and just subsequently in the house in the upper bedroom, yes.
All right. And with regard to the arrival of the criminal...
Before we start beating another dead horse with wherever he's going with this, we're going to break for today, and we'll start with his new line of questioning tomorrow. It'll get better. It really, really, really will. We know this. We know this because we refreshed our recollection. Guys, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you, thank you. I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye, guys. Thank you.